And once you become comfortable in your own skin, that's when you could really start to talk to people and know when is the appropriate time to really get out there. And when you're at conventions, don't care if it's a book fair, I don't care if it's Comic-Con or a trade show, you're there to get your name out there and to make money. And sitting there and crossing your fingers and hoping people come up to you is not going to do it. And even if they come up to you, if you can't engage them instantly, people get bored and they walk on.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 141 of the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In this episode, I have an interview with Luanga Nuwame. Luanga Nuwame, or Lou as most of his friends affectionately know him, is a 43-year-old Canadian comic book publisher and writer, YouTube cardboard craft artist, board game developer, and author. Residing in Mississauga, Ontario, Nuwame operates the Homemade Game Guru YouTube channel to showcase his love for making all sorts of crazy creations out of cardboard, be it furniture, exercise equipment, geek crafts, or swimming pools. There is no limit to what Lou can make out of cardboard. Nuwame's past cardboard designs have been featured on CBC News, CTV News, Make Magazine, Toronto Star, Global News, and Reader's Digest, among others. He achieved a world's record from the World's Record Academy in 2009 for the world's largest board game made by one person. Nuwame is also the founder of Zelfa Comics, named after his grandmother, and he acts as the principal writer and letterer for all published issues. He created the series Paper, Rock, Scissors, and Stuff Wars, the classic hand game brought to life on a distant planet, entered the world of Mephistopheles, a new horror series, and The Adventures of Little Petal Ann, a children's comic series. Beyond comics, Nuwame is a self-published author of a wide range of books. His novels include The Fantabulously Awesome Life of a Charity Donation Truck Driver, which is an expose on the clothing donation business, The Boy with Zero Self-Esteem, a memoir about his past battles with depression and loneliness, Hi, My Name is Karma, a short story, which is a thriller, Smoking a J with Jesus, religious criticism, and multiple adventures of Little Petal Ann children's books, as previously mentioned. The creativity, the innovation, the drive, and the passion seems endless for Lou, and I know you're going to have a good time listening to my interview with him. But first, a few of the front matter elements to this podcast before we get to the interview. First, I want to congratulate the Patreon winner of the consultation with Clark Chamberlain that I mentioned in episode 140. This was a random drawing of all the patrons of the Stark Reflections podcast, and Leanne Beckett was the patron winner of that 1-hour consultation with Clark. Congratulations, Leanne. I'll be contacting you to find out how to organize this story-stuck consult with Clark Chamberlain, which is worth $200. And I have had the pleasure of interacting with and seeing Clark in action in a workshop, and I know you're in for a real treat. So thank you, Leanne, for being a patron. Congratulations. And thanks to everyone who is a patron of the Stark Reflections podcast. Patrons of the podcast get access to additional bonus material, including video, text, and audio. For example, I just released a special episode, which was a sneak peek of the audio of an audiobook I just produced, and I shared the author's notes just to give writers an idea of what I've added to some of my short fiction, which I've talked about. And patrons get access to this additional bonus material. They also get access to other episodes, which are basically called Stark Reflections on Other Podcasts, where I share reflections of things I've learned from listening to so many other amazing podcasts out in the world, not necessarily always about writing. And you also get access occasionally to those random draws like I just did for great prizes that I think will benefit you as a writer. So thank you so much to all the patrons who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. And now for some comments from recent episodes. Now these are comments from episode 140, Rachel Herron, on writing your memoir. Well, that and so much more, but the titles have to be shortened down, right? Anyways, Caro says, great podcast as usual, Mark. Both Rachel and you provided useful advice and thought-provoking reflections. I watched your short video with the 3 marks, and now I'm thirsty for a beer. Thanks so much, Carol. Glad you enjoyed that. Kind of miss having a beer with you, and I'm looking forward to when you and I can have a beer together. Perhaps if you watched my Mark's Tavern pilot episode, which I'm going to talk about later in this episode, which I did release, perhaps you'll be even more thirsty for a beer, especially since that episode just teases out the beer as well. Claire Mendenhall also commented on that episode, and Claire said, I've been meaning to leave a comment as I love your podcasts. I met you in Oregon about 3 years ago and was so intimidated to meet you, but you were so friendly and generous to someone new to the business. Thank you. Rachel was a great guest, as you said she would be. I went straight to her website and signed up for her newsletter, and am considering some of her online classes. Continue on and know that you are appreciated. Claire. Well, thank you, Claire. That is so awesome for you to say, and greatly appreciate it. I think that might have been in response to something I said in the previous episode, where I know people are listening because when I see them in public, they mention that they've listened to the podcast, and maybe I was moaning or whining or crying that I don't get comments from everyone. And thank you so much for taking the time to leave that comment, Claire. And it was great to meet you in Oregon. That seems like so long ago, but I am thrilled to hear that you enjoy the podcast, and also ecstatic that you have discovered the wonderfulness, the awesomeness of Rachel Herron, and that there's some great content that you can glean from her. So thanks for taking the time to leave that comment, Claire. Really appreciate it. And in the same episode 140, James S. Aaron left this comment. Great episode. Rachel is such a generous teacher. And I do agree with you on that, James. Mark, something you mentioned in passing was your mastermind group. I read Jay Thorne's new book on masterminds recently, Secret Powers of the Author Mastermind, How to Transform from Struggling Writer to Career Author, but it's mostly aimed at new writers joining a group led by a more experienced writer. It's a book that would have been really beneficial to me when I was first starting out, but now I'm in a different place in my career. It would be great to hear about your experience with mastermind groups, especially if they've been a group of peers. How did you find your group, and what has made it useful to you? Any insight there would be really valuable. Thanks again for everything you do. Thanks, James. That is a great question, great comment. I'm actually thinking of putting that into a full-length episode talking about masterminds. I've only been in maybe 2 or 4 or 5, depending on how you define masterminds, which I think is even part of that description. But the first mastermind I was in, just in a nutshell, I was invited, and it was not even related to writing. It was with a member of Professional Speakers Association, and these were all business owners. So the benefit to me from that mastermind was learning about the other businesses, because it was helping me with writing as a business, and a consultation, and the podcast even as a business, and thinking of in those lines. And then the other writer mastermind that I just joined is one in which it is a bunch of fellow writers, most of which I think are far more successful than I am, or I look at them and I think we always have that comparison. I look at them and go, wow, they're so successful. They're great writers. I love what they're doing all kinds of innovative stuff. And I could probably talk a little bit about that. But that was basically through a friend who basically said, hey, we've got this mastermind and we think you would be a good addition to it. And I was like, well, I don't really have much to offer to you guys, but I'll probably learn. And that's how that happened. But James, great question. I'll probably have to go into masterminds and detailed experience about masterminds in a future episode that I'll probably dedicate to that. So thank you for that. Thank you to Caro and Claire and James for your comments. Thanks for taking the time to comment, because it's fun to interact and chat with folks with some of the things that they are thinking about. And you'll have a chance to respond to some of the things that Lou and I talk about in this episode later on, which I'll prompt you for later on. And you can leave comments over at starkreflections.ca for any episode. You can also at me on Twitter at Mark Leslie. And now a bit of a personal update. Well, as mentioned in last week's episode, I created the first episode of my Cheers parody. And I recorded the scenes last Saturday evening. And I only got through what was supposed to be the show's cold open. So the cold open, if you're not familiar with the industry terms, like it sound like I know the industry, but cold open is when a television show starts and it's just the opening prior to the credits. I think of like the SNL Saturday Night Live skit. The cold open is the thing that they start with, and then they do the Saturday Night Live. Well, same thing. Cold open on Cheers, for example, would be that opening scene, and then they do the opening credit. So I got through the part of the script that I wrote that was supposed to be the cold open, but I didn't even get to the part in the regular episode where one of the regular marks, which is kind of like the Norm character who walks in, and then the really bad dad jokes start flying. Now the full script was a little over 1,000 words, and it might have been based on that, might have been 12 to 15 minute episode. Well, I mean, almost not that much shorter than an actual episode of a sitcom. But I ended up realizing just how long it would take to do all of the work for the full episode, because it's really challenging standing there and acting half the lines all at once in a particular costume, like talking to a blank spot, pretending you're in conversation with another person, and then going back and doing the exact same conversation from the other side. Now, it's far more difficult than when I used to have to memorize just my own lines in a play, because in your own lines in your play, you're actually reacting off of another actor. So you can actually react. You can actually act to that. But when you're acting to lines in your head because you're trying to record that, it's challenging. And then I had to reshoot the exact same dialogue, and it's not the exact same dialogue because I didn't really memorize the script. Even though I wrote it, I didn't memorize it. I just kind of memorized the gist of it, and so I had to reshoot the same dialogue, and it wasn't always the same dialogue from different angles. And I only had one camera, which is basically my iPhone 6S on a tripod. And if I had multiple cameras, then that might have been useful for additional angles, so I get the exact same shot of me saying something from different angles, so it's easier for cutting from angle to angle. But then again, if I only had one tripod, it might have been visible in one of the long shots where I actually have the two of me, although there really wasn't two of me, and that's why I had to shoot the same thing again, because there I am in one shot on split screen, and then I am again. There's even one spot where I actually had to cut all of my stuff out because I gesture with my hands a lot when I talk, and my hand disappears in the shot because of the split screen. It just looks like it gets cut off. So I couldn't even use half of that footage, which was really frustrating. So I didn't have as many of the long shots as I really had planned on for that episode. But it was kind of intriguing. So recognizing the challenges that I had and just how long it took me to shoot the two people speaking, never mind the later scenes where there's three people interacting with each other, I adapted my strategy a bit, and I turned the cold open into the entire episode. And still, the whole experience was a lot of fun. It was a great learning experience where I could experiment with the cinematography, see if it could work, use the different camera angles, and then add in the fake audience laugh track, and even other sound effects that I needed to add in. Even the audio is different because depending on where I placed the iPhone, I was getting different room sound, or even sound from the street. In the beginning of the cold open, I'm actually outside, and as a car passes, that messes up a whole bunch of things. So I had to really adjust the audio and add layers and textures that you wouldn't even think about, and you don't think about until you're watching it back and you go, oh wow, you can hear a car in the background in this shot. But then when I have the shot where he zooms in to look at a sign that's not really there because it was just a still shot and it was photoshopped in, I had to still go and add the background audio from the previous scene. Otherwise, it just goes to car driving in the background, dead silence, car driving in the background. So it's really disconcerting. So it's amazing when you think about that as a writer, all of those extra textures and layers. But it's one of the senses, and so that reminded me of the things that writers need to pay attention to are all the senses. So, when you're doing a film, it makes you a lot more aware of those other senses, such as audio and the effect that that can have. Even the laugh track, it just really adds to it. It's cheesy, and it adds to the cheesiness, and that's part of the joke. But it also even adds to let you know that this is supposed to be funny, even if you didn't find it funny. So that was really, really fun. It was also interesting because I did the 6-minute episode as the pilot episode, and it's kind of like a beta version, just kind of to see if this is something that I could do, if people enjoyed it, and if it's something I should try to continue with, if it's actually worth it. And reactions so far, it's early days, but reactions been pretty positive. People seem to enjoy that. But ultimately, the whole experience was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot more about myself, and I learned a lot more skills, and again, as I just mentioned, some of the skills that I can take back to my writing, which I think is pretty damn awesome. Other news, I am working on some other writing projects. I have been interviewed so much lately for nonfiction paranormal ghost story stuff ever since the beginning of June when I was featured on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie, and I've been on so many shows, and it's been so fun to actually be interviewed as a writer, and I've kind of forgotten that because most of the times that I'm being interviewed, it's as an industry person. And so that's re-inspired me to go back to working on some of those nonfiction projects, which I'll be working a little bit more on, part of which I'll be working on a little bit later in this week. So technically, by the time you listen to this episode, I'm going to be on the road with my son at the beginning of July every year, because he's July 7th was when he was born. And it's a father-son annual tradition, the road trip. Alexander and I go on an adventure somewhere. Well, with COVID-19, it's a little bit challenging, so this time I rented a small RV, basically a large truck RV, self-contained with its own toilet, etc. We're going to do some camping. We're going to go up to my mom's house in northern Ontario, and because we're the plague monkeys, because we're coming from a part of Ontario that's, infectious way more than it is in northern Ontario, we're going to be going up there. We've got the camper trailer so we can stay in the camper in my mom's yard. We can go visit with her, barbecue, wear masks when we go in, kind of stay socially distant, but then do some chores and stuff that need to be done around our house. And my mom gets to see her grandson, gets to see her son, which will be a lot of fun, but we're doing it in a safe way. So that way we're not using public toilets. My mom has a basement, like the showers in the basement, as well as a washroom there. So we can kind of use those facilities when we're at her house and then bleach the heck out of them before we go, so that we do not potentially bring any infection to her. Because, we never know. We could be carrying COVID without showing symptoms. And even if you do have it, maybe you don't show it for another 14 days. And I don't want to take that risk, although I do want to see my mom, and I don't want to miss this awesome opportunity for hanging out with Alexander, as we always do on the annual boys road trip. Well, that's it for personal update stuff. Now let's hear a word from this episode's sponsor, Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is an author-centric platform to allow you to get your audiobook out into the market, into more than 43 retail and library channels. And there's no one way to do it. You can use Findaway Voices to find and hire a narrator. You can use Findaway Voices to upload your pre-existing audio that you already have. You can set your prices. There are promotion opportunities, all kinds of choices, including different ways you can interact with narrators. You can pay them up front, or there's even payment splitting options. Lots of choices. One of the examples of what I've done recently is I recently published Night Cries, Volume 1 in my series of Nocturnal Screams. Now, Night Cries is only about 16,000 words in length, and it's short stories. It's basically 3 short stories. What I did is I hired Chris Humphreys, who had done one of my other previous, he's a fellow writer, so I know him, and he's a voice actor, he's a great guy, and I hired him to do a previous book last year, and I wanted him to get more short stories out there, because the cost for getting short stories out there, it's like an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 45 minutes. If you're paying per hour, you're not paying as much, and through Findaway Voices, I've earned more of my money back on those short fiction episodes through library channels and cost per checkout methods and all kinds of ways that are helping me build my audio repertoire, so that I can eventually earn some cash and get the full-length books out there. But then there's a lot of SEO, there's a lot of audio content for me. So I hired Chris to do the short stories, and then this was interesting because he had already done one of the stories because it appeared in one of my other collections. I could just reuse that because I paid him up front for it, so he only had to do 2 of the stories, which cost me less. And then I had to do the author notes myself. And that, I thought, adds an extra layer of intimacy for the listener to actually hear the author's notes from the author. As I mentioned earlier, I shared what those author notes, the introduction that I read, as well as the author's notes. I shared that with my patrons. But to do all of that, both Chris's audio as well as my own audio, I followed the production tips from Wesley Ingram, who he's the chief engineer at Findaway Voices, and I'm going to have a link to the article in the show notes for this episode, starkreflections.ca, so you can follow it. This is a great in-depth article from the Findaway Voices blog, and not only is the text there, but there's the video where Wes talks you through the whole process and shows you how to master the audio in Adobe Audition, which it's a great tool, but it's not very intuitive for people like me. So every time I've done this, I've had to go back to the same video, the same article for Wesley. So I have it bookmarked, because I don't do it enough for it to become rote, right? Like, writing and stuff like that. So it's fantastic, great resources from Findaway Voices like that from their blog. And here's the cool thing is, it looks like it published to Kobo, Apple, and Google within 24 to 48 hours. And I know a lot of authors are having frustrations, whether they're direct to Audible through ACX or coming through Findaway Voices or another platform, that Audible is taking 6 to 8 weeks to 12 weeks to whatever. It's just been ridiculous. But it's so good to know when you're publishing your audio wide that it's actually in so many of these other channels almost immediately, which is fantastic. And I do have audio strategies for my next novella release, which is going to be happening hopefully in late July. And it's kind of dependent upon some other factors. But that is just one of the ways you can use Findaway Voices for your experience. And if you're looking for how you can leverage Findaway Voices as an author, you can go check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. Well, that's it for the introductory matter. I do have to let you know that in this interview, Lou's audio became a little bit ripply at times, which is really frustrating. We had it at the beginning. We thought we had resolved it, and then I didn't notice until after we were finished recording. But it is such a great discussion, so if you can handle the little bit of rippliness, it's well worth it for the gems of wisdom that you get from Lou. Lou, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here, Mark. Love talking to you, man.
So I have to go back to the beginning. I need to understand, you do so many different creative things, so many fun things, so many ingenious creations, like an inventor. Where did it all start for you, that desire to be a storyteller, to be a creator?
Well, the creative part was just making things start off when I was a teenager, living with my father, and just having a lot of time to make things out of cardboard. When it comes to the writing part, I've always found time to express myself through, my own little stories. I suffered from depression when I was younger, in my teens into my 20s. So writing was a great outlet because, as a very introverted person, especially when I was younger, I didn't know how to emote my feelings to people, and I felt people didn't care. So I just kind of wrote everything down myself. And beyond writing about my life, it was great to escape into fantasy. So as a comic book fan, I would just find ways to just create different stories. Just write a whole bunch of different comic book concepts, put them away, write another one, and it just continued on from there until the point where I was able to comfortably start coming out with my own comic books.
What were the comic books that fascinated you when you were young?
It first started, Silver Surfer #4, 1987 is what started it all. But I'm not a Marvel versus DC. I love them both. I love Batman, just as much as I love any Marvel character. I discovered Image and even the classics, like the Silver Age stuff from Fawcett and Dell and Gold Key. I just love the medium of comic books, period. I just love the imagination that goes into every story. I could appreciate it, no matter how corny. Like even the underground stuff, what was considered underground back then, like Madman or Flaming Carrot, or Reed, the Most Dangerous Milkman, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which of course is mainstream now. I just love seeing these crazy stories that people just sat down and thought about and came out with. So my influences are just so vast when it comes to comics.
So speaking of these crazy concepts in comic books, I mean that is how I remember discovering you when you were my booth partner at Hamilton Comic Con, or my booth neighbor at Hamilton Comic Con. But we partnered up obviously because we kind of looked after each other's tables when the other guy had to
Yeah.
go to the washroom or whatever. But you had this really awesome comic book, which could you just share a little bit about that?
Oh, not a problem. So this is it right here, Paper Rock Scissors and Stuff Wars. And that's the title on the back. And so what it was is that when I first saw this concept, I was at a friend's house, and he's part Mongolian, and his uncle came in from Mongolia at the time I just happened to be visiting, and he's from a small village with barely even a TV. And so I don't even remember why. Maybe it's over a liquor or an argument, but we got into a rock paper scissors competition, and I don't even remember who won. Probably me. But afterwards, I thought about it, and it's like, this guy comes from a small village in the middle of nowhere, Mongolia, and yet he knows the hand game rock, paper, scissors. So that opened my eyes to how universal this game is. And then I thought, well, everyone knows the game, but no one's put a story behind it. So put it in outer space, because everything's better in space. I gave them their own planet, gave them their own sentient societies, and thought of the story. What would happen if they all had their own separate kingdoms, and then they discovered each other? And give them kind of human attributes, the human way of thinking. So Scissors finds out that they are dominant against this other species. What would a dominant species think if they're sentient and able to rationalize? What would they do with that knowledge that they have that kind of power over another kingdom? And just played it off from there. And I had no preconceived ideas of where I was going with this. I just wrote the story as it came to me.
And so I think I remember when I was talking to you earlier about the scissors, like one of them is very sharp, very convincing people, like a leader, right? That kind of thing. And some of the scissors were not interested in cutting paper.
Yeah, exactly. So the general being they're the antagonists in the story, but their leader saw this other empire, sent spies, saw it, and like, okay, we can take over these guys, and they pretty much commit genocide against them. And then, of course, within the scissors ranks, you have those who feel that, they figure out there's other empires, so they want to kind of conceive a way to conquer everyone and usurp the leader of the scissors to be their own. But then within the kingdom, there are those who are like, why are we even doing this in the first place? Who cares? And then the rocks, they're the impartial ones, that they're technically the strongest of them all. And one fun part is that people are like, well, how did you explain that paper beating rocks? And I go, oh, that's a no-brainer. That's simple. Rocks are claustrophobic. So you use the claustrophobia, so it's technically not defeating them, but they're so afraid of enclosed spaces that's what is their weakness. And just playing off of there, and then there's going to be alliances. So rock and paper, can they put their differences aside to work together to take on scissors? And then throw in the wild card, the anvils, which no one truly understands, but they play a crucial role in all of this.
Yeah, because it's in stuff, right? That's part of the.
It's stuff.
So that leaves you open for all kinds of possibilities in these universes.
Oh, definitely.
Excellent. So
again, the anvils.
Oh man! So you had the ideas behind the stories, but you have described yourself as not an artist. So how did you find collaborators to work with for the art?
So it all started, and I have to give a huge shout out to my good friend, my brother from another mother, George Leon, who lives in the U.S. in Washington State. He's a decorating veteran. He's a dude, the Big Lebowski. He's a big dude. He has that attitude. He's so chill. And he was actually a subscriber to my YouTube channel, The Homemade Game Guru. And we hit it off from there. He would always comment on my videos, and we became friends. And I found that he's an artist, an underground artist. So as a favor, he did the first issue for me. And then I met a Mississauga artist named Daniel Wong, who did a cover for me. And so this was the very first issue that ever came out. So Daniel Wong's cover with George's artwork. And because of just the cover alone that Daniel did, it sold well, and people really liked it. But then Daniel's a busy in-demand guy. George is busy with his own thing. So for a while, nothing happened with the book. Like, went to more and more comic conventions. I met you at Hamilton. you get to network and talk with like-minded people. Doesn't matter what the discipline is, being novels or comic books or just artwork. And I met a man named Hugh Rowood, who's an independent artist, and he saw the book and gave him a copy. He's like, I'm in, I'm working on this. And that's how I was able to come out with a new version of issue number 1, issue number 2, and then issue number 3, and then finish it off with issue number 4, what we're currently working on.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is amazing. But you don't just leave it at story, prose that gets converted into art with a partner. You've actually done your own three-dimensional physical world creations, large, small, but always beautiful, always ingenious. How did you get into this cardboard world?
Well, that started off really with YouTube. That in 2008, I think YouTube started in 2006 or 2005. I'm not too sure, but I found out about it in 2008, and I was like, okay, I got it. And I just happened to get a video camera, like a camcorder, for Christmas that year. So I was like, okay, let me make some videos. And I started putting out some simple cardboard craft videos, how to make a picture frame and kitty stuff like that. And in 2011, I came out with a cardboard swimming pool just for the fun of it, and that went viral before viral.
Wait a second. How do you make a cardboard swimming pool? Doesn't it, like, the water seep through?
I know most people think it's a paper product, water will seep through, but I figured out how to take a coating mix to varnish the inside so water wouldn't permeate through it. But the issue was I didn't think about water pressure. The more water you put in the pool, the more outward pressure, and cardboard will eventually rip because of that. But amazingly, the camera didn't catch that part. It ended with the pool working perfectly. So, but that showed me that there was more potential doing really ostentatious designs, really over-the-top stuff. And that's when I went to cardboard treadmills, cardboard lift-co machines, giant standees the size of my house, furniture, swords and weapons, which I love doing. And that's what really started it off for me.
Wait a second. Giant board games? Giant what?
Like, for instance, I made my current claim to fame right now that got me onto a lot of news, including Reader's Digest, which was cool, is that I made a modular board game solution. So I converted my entire living room into a giant board game using huge octagons that have explain on the space what you're supposed to do. So sing, dance, break dance, lose a turn, gain points. And I did it to entertain my daughter and my YouTube subscribers. I think the video's been seen 6,000 times in the month and a half that it's been up, which is cool. And yeah, that's the kind of stuff I enjoy doing. And I designed it in a way that it could take a whole entire floor, but then it could collapse into one pile and tucked away in a corner. So, you know, it could be used in a multitude of ways.
Oh my God! So this is this something people can order for their own home?
I wanted to, but because of the size, it would cost a fortune. Most people who use Canada Post knows that, you know, it's expensive to ship things. So I instead made some designs for Canada Day instead, knowing that the Canada Day's weekend is coming up. It's actually tomorrow, and you know, something that we celebrate and, you know, pay love to the country that you know, we live in and get so much from.
Well, that is awesome. Now, I have seen these beautiful creations, but can you explain what this beautiful Canada series is?
Oh, definitely. So this is an example without the cover. So I have two examples. So this is my the one in Saskatchewan that Premier Scott Moe actually received and thanked me for it. But here's the Ontario one without the cover on it. Just so I make these by hand, all intricately cut out 5 layers deep.
Okay, so I see the Parliament buildings, I see Niagara Falls, I see the Ontario flag.
Yeah, this is from Hamilton, the castle that they have.
Dundurn. Oh, wow, cool.
From Hamilton, CN Tower, Roulette Park near Thunder Bay is in the background behind the Parliament building. The Horse and Nickel from Sudbury. So what I try to do is for every province and territory, find landmarks and landforms, natural landforms, that show the beauty and uniqueness of each region. And I made an overlapping 5-layer deep collage, of course, with the flags, so you know what province it is, the territory. And I wanted it to help promote every region of this country, because Canada, to me, is truly one of the most beautiful and diverse countries on Earth. And this is my way of like sharing that with fellow Canadians.
So this is something you can put on your bookshelf. You can put it on your bookshelf. You can close it up like a book, put it there, pull it out, open it up, and it's, what was it, 5 layers?
Yeah, 5. So technically 6. I just don't count the back layer because it's just a background, but technically 6 layers.
6 layers. Wow.
But I signed these, so it's just a memento. So it just sits there. But it's a reminder. You can look at it and appreciate parts of your province or parts of Canada that you've never been to. It's made by me by hand. Even the cardboard is Canadian. I'm making a maximum of 100 of these if it gets to that much. But I just wanted to make something where it's truly Canadian, made by someone who's passionate about their country, and it's something special that you can look at it and know that you have something that is Canada through and through.
And handcrafted. I mean, you're not using any sort of machines or factory or anything. You're creating all of these yourself. That's got to take up quite a bit of space, real estate in your house. Oh, and your 2 hands.
Yeah, that's it. Or they're like, arthritis kicks in. But for now, these are my machines, and that's what they look like. And then I do everything by hand, every single thing, because this is what I like to do. It's something personal. Like, it could be made in Canada, but it could be made in Canada by still an assembly plant, where I am the assembly plant. I sit in my living room, that little part of the living room that my wife says I can have, and just cut away, and this is the end result.
That is fantastic. So you must have supplies coming from a cardboard plant, or how does this work? Or is it just all like stuff that comes into the house in boxes, so you're ordering a lot of things?
No, the cardboard I actually use, this is called 275 pound. It's actually the stuff that they ship refrigerators and stoves in. It's one of the heaviest grades that you could get. So even cutting through it is tricky. I'm used to it. So I have a supplier for them who gets it from a Canadian manufacturer, I think in BC. And then from there, I buy them in bulk, so I have to pay for them. But then I buy them in bulk, and then I just sit there and I start cutting them. The images I actually make in Photoshop myself, and then glue them down, and then intricately cut out every groove, every nook and cranny of them, and then glue them layer after layer after layer until you get the final thing, and then paint them. This one's not painted yet, but on the painting,
Wow, this must take forever. Like it must be. You must be a very patient man.
I look at it that if it's something that you enjoy doing, like I look at it, I've written a couple of books, but they're not novels. I look at writers like yourself who like these 300-page things, and I was like, I don't even have the patience to do that. But if it's something you enjoy doing, then you find it's not even about patience anymore. It's just about you just do it. You find it in your heart, you have the joy, and you just make it. So. Yeah, it's taking about 1 hour, 2 hours to make some of these, but I don't even notice that time. Once you're in the zone, you're in the zone.
Oh, fantastic. Now, another thing that I believe that you're very passionate about, because I've seen you in action as my neighbor at Comic-Con, at more than one Comic-Con, we happen to be lucky enough to be beside each other. I got to see you in action and just be in awe at the way you interacted with people that came to your booth, like dynamic and engaging and fun and funny and charming and yet humble at the same time. Like all of these things that just you can't help but love you, right? When you're in a conversation. But I heard that you're actually an introvert, which kind of shocked me. How did this happen? How did you be so outgoing and so dynamic in your booth when you're like an introvert?
I think a lot of people have misconceptions of what it really means to be an introvert. I've always been an introvert. Now, when I was younger, when I was going through my depression and going through harder times, being an introvert was detrimental. You kind of overlap into your own shell, unable to emote your emotions, and you don't want to open up to people. But eventually, when you come into yourself and you become what I like to use the term self-actualize, when you can really rationalize what is negative about you, but what's good about you, and where you fit in this world. When I really hit that point, I would say in my mid-30s, I became comfortable in my own skin. And once you become comfortable in your own skin, that's when you could really start to talk to people and know when is the appropriate time to really get out there. And when you're at conventions, I don't care if it's a book fair, I don't care if it's Comic-Con or a trade show, You're there to get your name out there and to make money. And sitting there and crossing your fingers and hoping people come up to you is not going to do it. And even if they come up to you, if you can't engage them instantly, people get bored and they walk on. It wasn't instant for me. I went to Fan Expo, which is Canada's largest Comic-Con 5 years ago. Just dove in there into the biggest one head first, and it was a massive learning. I'm actually glad I did it. I incurred a loss in the Comic-Con, but it was worth the experience because I got to watch, up my game, and understand. So by the time I got to Hamilton the next year and got beside you, and my game was more defined. And I tell people the key is to read people's body language and their faces. An old term, I don't know where I heard it from, but I heard a saying that the mouth will lie 100 times in a minute, but the body will tell you the truth 100% of the time. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I started with that, and I understood that, okay, if you act a certain way or look at me in a certain way, I could gauge how much interest you have in dealing with me, and I go from there. And so when people see me chatting up, that has been refined over time to get to that point. It's not instant. You have to live and learn in order to get to that point.
Wow, that is amazing. And it just seems so natural, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot of processing. There's a lot of paying attention to the finer details that maybe people don't realize are happening.
Yeah. I think even at one point I was like, selling myself and then trying to get people to go over to Mark's booth.
You probably sold more of my books than I did that day, probably. Well, that's the other thing too, right? You can tell if they're not interested in your stuff, but maybe you can pick up on an interest of somebody else you know. And that is part of the culture, right? Is, hey, well, you're not into, true ghost story books, but you'll love comic books. Oh my God, have you seen the really cool Wonder Woman thing that Lou has on his booth? There's only one left. You better go grab it now.
Well, this is one of the things I love about the comic world. And I love the fact that even novelists like yourself get immersed in this book, because it's about the greater image of like science fiction, horror, all together. And one thing I love about it is that many of us, we understand each other. We're all small guys to medium guys trying to make our way in this. So I've done it many times where my neighbors are, even if people buy my stuff, hey, check out this person over here, this stuff's amazing. And people have done it for me that they've sent people, even from another side of a convention, like, you like my stuff, go check out my buddy Lou. He has amazing stuff. So that's the camaraderie we have, and I do miss it. I truly do miss it, because it's all about networking. I've told other up-and-comers and newbies at it, even if they don't want my advice, I give it to them anyways, that even if you're not making money, that's fine. Network. Talk to people. Make connections in this place, because a lot of these people, they're in the exact same boat you are, and you could work together. Like, who knew that all those years ago that we would be here having this conversation?
Yeah,
exactly. Just two neighbors. This is the beauty of it. This is the fun of it. And even with my comic books, I've had comic books like, comic book legends doing covers for me. I love it. This is what I love about this industry, the sci-fi, the horror, and the comic book industry. There's a lot of humility in here. There's a lot of, like, all of us, we get each other. We understand each other.
That is absolutely phenomenal. So I have to ask, because the comic cons, I mean, I saw you at a number of them. Even sometimes we were neighbors, sometimes we bumped into each other as we were doing our tour to see who else was there. You obviously haven't been able to do that in the last several months. A lot of things have been canceled. How have you, pivoted in these times?
It's been very difficult, being completely honest, because Comic-Cons is just a natural place where you could talk to people, that people look and touch what you create that rapport with them, answer questions on the spot. Outside of this, it's, the main thing you have is your website. And using tools like YouTube and Twitter, which I'm not, I have to admit, I'm horrible at social media, which surprises people, because I'm an old school guy where once I'm comfortable with something, I'm good with it. So Facebook, YouTube, I know them. Instagram, I just don't have the patience for it. TikTok that's for kids. I
Or
just
older people like me.
exactly old parts like us. So it's a challenge. It is a
Yeah.
challenge. I would be lying if I mastered it. It is very difficult because with a website, you're one of a billion websites out there. So you're trying to convince people to go and then trust that your website is not going to be hacked. Your information. That's a huge part of it. That you try to sell on eBay and Amazon, but you want people to go on your website, but do they really know your website? So there's a lot of challenges to this. My key is trying to work with the media. I've been fortunate enough to get a lot of media attention for what I do, and even that is a tricky game, where a lot of it is just timing, good timing to get yourself out there. But beyond that, you just keep on persevering and you cross your fingers and hope that we can get back to Comic-Cons and that they will adjust and figure out how to make their business plans work. And that's about it. And I know yourself and many authors are going through the exact same thing. It's tricky, this new reality out.
So you have these YouTube videos where you actually walk people through, like you've built a life-size TARDIS, right? Because you're even taller than me, 6'4", right?
Yeah.
And you've built
I'm
a life-size TARDIS, but it wasn't just that. It was one that you could transport easily?
Yeah. So
Not in a Doctor Who sense, but in a...
I got in there with the whooshing noise and, fight the Daleks later. But, I made it where I could collapse it and rebuild it anywhere. It's actually in the basement right now, stored because when you create this much cardboard stuff over 8 years, it collects.
Yeah.
And, I have a storage room in the basement that's all just my cardboard crafts that I've made over all these years, and because there's just no room, and my wife is as tolerant as she can be.
So if somebody wanted a TARDIS or they wanted a custom something, would they reach out to you and you do custom builds like that?
It would be fun. Like, it's yet to happen for those like something as big as a TARDIS, but I've done custom works for people, so I mean mostly signs. Like, I've had businesses approach me to make them 3D cardboard signs, use a coating mix on it so it doesn't warp. And I've done glow-in-the-dark artwork posters where people like, you have one of my Wonder Woman prints. Your wife and I got you got that off of me. And so I've done one for families, done a family portrait for people as well. So
family portrait, you mean like a multi-layered portrait like your Beautiful Canada series? Oh my God, what a beautiful gift.
Yeah, so what I did for one family is they reached out because they actually saw me at Comic-Con and I brought it up. So months later, they reached out to me. So I gave them instructions. So it has to be a family portrait where they're all together. Their hair is, slicked back, and because hair is a pain to cut out.
Flowing in the wind.
Yeah, I can't do that. So they did, and I did it where the kids were in front, the parents in the back. So I did a 3D where I had the background, then the parents, then the kids, and then they had a table on them. So I did another layer of the table in front of them. And then I used a glow-in-the-dark mix from Glow Ink, my favorite company for glow-in-the-dark paint. And that's the poster I made for them for $60. Oh, wow. And they were even happy with the price. Like, you're doing all that for $60? And I was like, yeah, not a problem.
That is phenomenal. I love that. I'm thinking, my mind is spinning for all these great gift ideas now. No, but the other thing you do... Yeah. The next thing is you don't only have, like, you show people how to do these cardboard creations, but you have the YouTube videos where very personal and funny, like the one where you're building the TARDIS, your wife was pregnant, and there's the joke about you not taking her to the hospital, but binge watching Doctor Who so you can figure out how to build this thing. But you have a book available that people can, with designs and everything, so they can just do some of these things themselves.
Yeah, so what I did is I came out with a book called The Cardboard Bible. And this was a complete offshoot of my channel. And I thought, okay, let me do a DIY book. Because at the time I was blogging for Make Magazine. Like, I actually had a freelance blog for Make Magazine. And I thought, let me elevate my game. So I'll show you what templates you need and the specifications, the sizes to make everything. So in this one, I show how to make an actual cardboard treadmill that got me onto the news, a cardboard foosball table, cardboard weapons, an ab roller. Don't go out there and pay $40 when you can do it for $2 and get a material from a dollar store. a seat table, which a lot of people never heard of. It's actually a common product where instead of like you want to eat your dinner and watching TV, instead of putting the tray on your lap, there's a table that slides over your lap, under your couch, so it's secure. And so that, and yeah, just crazy crap like that. And hopefully there'll be a volume 2 one day. But so far, this has been my best-selling book on Amazon, but by no means am I on the New York Times list. But I enjoy the fact that people do like it, and it's a 5-star book, so that's cool.
That is fantastic. That is awesome. So, Lou, where can people find out more about you? Check out your custom creations, maybe order Beautiful Canada, some custom prints, find out about your books.
Okay, so my YouTube channel for first is Homemade Game Guru. Just type that up on YouTube and you'll find my crazy stuff on there. My website, which has pretty much all my products, is Handmade Cardboard Innovations, all together, handmadecardboardinnovations.com. It's through Shopify. It's 100% secure. So I got the HTTPS there, so any transactions are fully secure, so that's good. And on Amazon, I know my name is tricky, but just type up Luanga, last name Nuwame, and you'll get every book I published on there. Like, for example, if you ever want to know how the donation industry works, I was a truck driver for one of the major charities in North America, and I give you the inside scoop on where your donations go to, the scams, everything out there. So yeah, I'm all over the place. Even if you Google Luanga Nuwame, I'm blessed to have a very unique name. When I was younger, having a unique name was horrendous. But when you're older and you appreciate your name, having a unique name is worth its weight in gold. Because if you type up Luanga Nuwame, all you'll get is pages upon pages of everything that's me.
Awesome. And I imagine if you Google handmade cardboard creations or innovations, that you probably come up.
Cardboard swimming pool. That's all you have to put in. You'll get my
cardboard swimming pool, and there's Lou in the backyard just enjoying a hot summer day. Well, Lou, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Hey, Mark. Anytime, man. Anytime. I love talking to you, man. And I do miss you, man. All the best to you and your wife and your son. And I know we'll chill at Comic-Con again, man.
I look forward to it, my friend.
All right, man. All the best, brother.
So many things to reflect upon from this discussion. First thing I want to talk about is Lou turned his initial Fan Expo failure into a success. He went in, basically invested time and a lot of money and failed in a big way. But what's more important is he learned from that loss and he turned that into a new strength. Now, I always consider myself, even though I am an introvert like Lou, I consider myself pretty well adept at being out there and being in front of people and putting on a good persona to be entertaining and etc. But he blew my mind just how amazing and engaging he was in interacting. And I learned so much just from watching him the multiple times I had the chance to watch him in action. So again, he didn't do this immediately. He failed big time, but then turned it into a strength. We can all learn from that. Now, the other thing is, I have to preface this by saying I like to interview and learn from people whose creative energy isn't directly associated with writing prose, like myself, because in the way that science fiction can be the perfect mirror held up to reality, allowing us to see something we might not be able to properly see because of our built-in biases, looking at what other creatives are doing in other artistic endeavors can highlight things for us that we might not otherwise attend to. In this case, it's Lou's dedication to the craft of working with cardboard, his patience with the process of handcrafting, trying new things, testing new ideas, new markets, exploring new opportunities. It's taking those risks, putting in the hours of hard work because it's something he loves, and applying his imagination into reshaping the art of others. Cardboard swimming pool, cardboard treadmill, furniture, cosplay costumes, and novelties. Those are fascinating adaptations of existing things in a new medium. And even when he creates 3D versions of classic comic book covers or medleys or collages or of logos with images from comic books, which he did for the glow-in-the-dark Wonder Woman logo and image collage he made that I bought for Liz, he's molding and adapting and reimagining something that is familiar into something new. Shakespeare did that. He took stories from the Greeks and readapted his own interpretations of them, and they've done okay. They're still with us hundreds of years later. Great film directors do that. Rob Reiner's adaptation of The Body by Stephen King in the movie Stand By Me turned me into a lifelong fan of King's writing because of something cool that Rob Reiner did. And Lou himself did it with his Rock, Paper, Scissors comic book. He adapted a hand game that you can play with just your hands, with just your body. And he discovered that it was universal and turned it into an intergalactic epic tale. And then he also collaborated with multiple artists to make that happen. So like his cardboard creations, he is adapting and creating and inventing things on so many different layers. And there's so much to learn from Lou and his inspirational example. Now, I could go on, of course, with the ways that Lou inspires me or teaches me new things, but I'm curious to hear from you, dear listener. What is your favorite thing that you have learned from listening to Lou and learning about his creative passions? What does it make you reflect on? You can leave those comments over at starkreflections.ca for episode 141. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy this podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend that you think would get benefit from it. You can also leave a review on the podcatcher of your choice. Until next week, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.